Winter has long been a time of celebration around the world. Centuries before the arrival of the man called Jesus, early Europeans celebrated light and birth in the darkest days of winter. Many people rejoiced during the winter solstice, when the worst of the winter was behind them and they could look forward to longer days and extended hours of sunlight. In Scandinavia, the Norse celebrated Yule from December 21st through January. This was in recognition of the return of the sun. Fathers and sons would bring home large logs, which they would set on fire. The people would feast until the log had burned out, which would take as many as 12 days. So some large logs. Like a little Yule thing. The Norse believed that each spark that came from the fire represented a new pig or calf that would be born during that coming year. So, to make sure that we all understand the winter solstice and the summer solstice. The winter solstice is the shortest day of the year. The summer solstice is the longest day of the year. We are approaching the winter solstice, in fact, this week. Anybody know when it is? 21st at exactly 6:38 p.m. The Earth in its orbit will be, on its axis, will be pointed as far away from the sun as possible, 23 degrees and 26 feet away from the sun. And each day thereafter will actually be a little bit longer. You won't really notice it till we get into mid-January, but each day thereafter will be a little bit longer. And so the idea for these people who celebrated the sun, remember the sun was it. Everybody loved the sun. And so when they reached that day where they knew the sun would be coming back, they would party it up. They would celebrate. In fact, it goes on to say, the end of December was a perfect time for celebration in most areas of Europe. At that time of the year, most cattle was slaughtered so it wouldn't have to be fed during the winter. And for many, it was the only time of the year that they had a fresh supply of meat. In addition, most wine and beer that they'd made throughout the year was finally fermented and ready for drinking. In Rome, where winters were not as harsh, they celebrated Saturnalia, a holiday in honor of Saturn, the god of agriculture. Beginning in the week leading up to the winter solstice and continuing for that whole month, Saturnalia was a hedonistic time when food and drink were plentiful and the normal Roman social order was actually turned upside down. For these few weeks, slaves would be masters, peasants were in command of the city, businesses and schools were closed so that everyone could join the fun. Also, around the time of the winter solstice, Romans observed Juvenalia, a feast honoring children of Rome. In addition, members of the upper class often celebrated the birthday of Mirtha, the god of the unconquerable sun, on December 25th. It was believed that Mirtha, an infant god, was born of a rock. For some Romans, Mirtha's birthday was the most sacred holiday of the year. The larger-than-life myths surrounding Santa Claus actually emanate from the very real person of St. Nicholas. It's difficult to know the exact details of his life with certainty. The ancient records are sparse, but we can pick up various pieces along the way. He was a gift giver. He was born in the 3rd century in a Greek village called Patara. A Turkish village, rather, named Patara. He was born into a rich family, but his parents died tragically when he was quite young. His parents had raised him to be a devout Christian, which led him to spend great amounts of his inheritance on helping the poor, especially children. He was known to frequently give gifts to children, sometimes even hanging socks filled with treats and presents. Perhaps the most famous act of kindness was when he helped 3 sisters. Because their family was too poor to pay for their wedding dowry, these 3 young women were facing a life of prostitution and slavery. Nicholas paid their dowries, thereby saving them from a horrible life of sexual slavery. Does anybody know the story of how that happened? We know that he paid it, but the story has been made much more fanciful over the years. The story is told that when they all went to bed, he looked in the window, saw that they were all asleep. You know, Christy?
No.
Oh, you look like you knew.
I'm on the edge of my chair.
He took a gold coin, one for each of them, and threw it up the roof. It went in the chimney, and they had clothes hanging on the line by the fireplace, and fell into their socks, thereby starting the whole thing up. stockings. Now, Nicholas grew up to be a well-loved Catholic leader and was eventually voted the Bishop of Myra, which is a Greek city. Paul actually visited that city in Acts 27. Nicholas reportedly also traveled to the legendary Council of Nicaea, where he helped defend the deity of Jesus Christ in 325. Now, following his death on December 6th, 343 AD, he was canonized as a saint, and the anniversary of his death, December 6th, became the St. Nicholas holiday, where gifts were given in his memory. He remained a very popular saint among Catholics and Orthodox Christians, with some 2,000 churches named after him. The holiday in his honor eventually merged with Christmas, since they were celebrated within weeks of each other. During the Reformation, however, Nicholas fell out of favor with the Protestants, that's us, who did not approve of canonizing certain people as saints and venerating them with holidays. His holiday was not celebrated in any Protestant country except Holland, where his legend as, the Holland way that you say St. Nicholas, is Sinterklaas. The legend lived on in Holland. Now in Germany, Martin Luther replaced him with the Christ child as the object of celebration. In Germany, Christ child is said Christkindl. Over time, the celebration of Christ child was simply pronounced Kris Kringle. But in an odd twist of fate, Kris Kringle became another name for Santa Claus instead of Christ. There's all sorts of legend and folklore about Santa Claus, not worth getting into, but it is important to note that the stories of Sinterklaas were brought over to America by the Dutch immigrants who settled in New York. December 25th was chosen because the church wished to replace the pagan solstice festivals with a Christian holy day. Holiday, holy day. They thought that taking away an unholy but traditional festival and replacing it with a good one would be easier than trying to end a long-standing tradition, right? So instead of, they all love to party and all that, so instead of trying to stop them, let's try and refocus them.
Clean it up.
Yes, clean it up. It was decided that the church would remember Jesus Christ's birthday with a Mass, the Christ Mass. Christmas. Now, in the early 17th century, a wave of religious reform changed the way Christmas was celebrated in Europe. When Oliver Cromwell and his Puritan forces took over England in 1645, they vowed to rid England of its decadence, and as part of their effort, they canceled Christmas. It wasn't restored again until the reign of Charles II. Meanwhile, the Pilgrims, who of course were English separatists who came to America in 1620, were even more orthodox than the Puritans. As a result, Christmas was not a holiday in America, and from 1659 to 1681, the celebration of Christmas was actually outlawed in Boston. Anyone exhibiting the Christmas spirit was fined 5 shillings. By contrast, down in Virginia at the Jamestown settlement, Captain John Smith reported that Christmas was enjoyed by all and passed on without any incident. After the American Revolution, English customs again fell out of favor, and so Christmas was banned, and it wasn't until June 26, 1870 that Christmas was declared a federal holiday.